Right.
Okay. So, has anybody used a Citation Manager or Zotero before? Okay, cool. So Zotero is there are a couple of citation managers out there. I'm going to focus on Zotero today, but Mendeley and some others work in a similar way. Basically, it's a platform or software that you use to organize your sources. It generates in-text citations as well as bibliographies. And this is what it looks like when you download it.
Can you make that a lot bigger?
It looks like this. And basically the left side is kind of how I organize my items into folders and tags. The items themselves are here, and then the right-hand column has like the bibliographic details of whatever. This is a journal article, so it has the title, authors, etc. So what Kelsey was mentioning earlier, we're going to focus on the My Publications folder here, and this exists in Mendeley and Zotero automatically. It's just there. And what this does is it links files that you've dragged into this folder. So I just made up 2 items of mine, and it links it to your public online profile. So Zotero has like an online backup, and so it's linked to your desktop app, and then it creates a profile like this. So it has my book section and my journal article. So getting this into Activity Insight is relatively simple. You want to make a bib text file, export it from Zotero, and then upload it into Activity Insight. So I go into my publication folder. The strength here is that you can filter by these items at the top. So if I know that I just need to upload the stuff that I wrote or published this year, I can filter by date and then just highlight the ones that I need to add to my profile. So I'm going to highlight these 2. I'm going to right-click and hit Export Items. And then I'm asked to pick the format, which is BibTeX. And I actually just want to export notes because exporting files exports like PDFs or whatever is attached to it. So I'm going to export notes, and I'm going to put it on the desktop, sure. And then I'm going to go back to my Activity Insight Activities landing page, scroll down to Publications. We've been here before. Click Import, and then use the Import from BibTeX file option. So I choose my file. There it is. Hit Open. Confirming these are my items and okay, and then there are my 2 items. I'd like to point out that Zotero is really good at gathering the metadata for journal articles. So all of these fields that are here, a lot of that was automatically detected by the Zotero software. So you don't have to go in and write every single author or every single issue and page number and all that. That's the power of Zotero. So to avoid all of the
Do you want to just show how you do that?
Sure.
Just from the journal article page?
Sure.
I have an even more basic question.
Sure.
How do you get things into Zotero?
There are a couple of ways. So Zotero you can drag. The easiest way is to just drag files in from wherever you saved it on your computer. We have
What kinds of files? Yeah, because I'm talking about the actual citations.
Okay, so yes, you can drag. Well, primarily it works really well for like text-based things like a book chapter, or book title, or journal article. So you can just drag those in if you have like PDF copies. So the types of items that can be stored, or the bibliographic information that can be stored in Zotero it's a huge list. So it can be a blog post, a book section, a film.
What if I have like a whole bibliography as a PDF?
Mhm.
If I put that PDF in will it capture all of the bibliography?
No. So
That would be magic though.
It
So if anybody figures out how to make that happen.
Because I'm still not clear, when you say drag it,
Mhm.
am I dragging like a PDF of my article?
Yeah.
Or, oh,
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
And it can get the title from
Mhm.
it and the pagination?
Yeah, so I could show you, so let me see, I'm gonna grab an article from my, let's see if I downloaded an article recently. To my class folder. Okay, so I'm reading this article, let's say, this one, Open Access. So I downloaded this from the database, library database, and I saved it to my class folder that I have on my computer, and I'm going to drag it into Zotero. So this is a PDF, so I'm just going to drag it here. It should open as an item. Okay, so it's highlighted right here. So what happened was I dragged in a PDF, and Zotero detected that it was a journal article, and that this was the title, this was the author, and these were the volumes. So it detects that because that metadata is embedded in the PDF that I downloaded. And then now I can use this, I can highlight this and generate a bibliographic citation from this inside Zotero. Zotero also has a plugin for Word, so as you're writing, you can also generate an in-text citation and a bibliography in Word of this source. So you can drag it in. Zotero also has a web browser capture tool, which is this Z here. Okay, so if I'm just browsing and I'm looking for an article, let's say I want to look at the Archives and Records journals. Okay, let's click one of these articles. Multi-sensory, okay. Let's say I find this article and like, this is perfect, this is what I want. I want to pull this into Zotero. So I do that by clicking this icon here. So this was a Z, but now it's this journal icon because Zotero is detecting that there is a journal article on this page. So when I click on this button, it should automatically pull in. So it's saving the article, the bibliographic information, and the full text PDF into my library. So let's say I am Victoria and this is my article, so I pulled this down and then I go to my desktop version and it's nicely highlighted right here. It did correctly pull all this metadata and that it's a journal article. And now I can just drag this into the My Publications folder. Okay, I didn't create the work, so I'm not going to do it. But basically, you drag it in there, and then this will, again, link up to your profile, and then you can sort it and export whichever one's as a bib text file, and then import that into Activity Manager. There's a lot more about citation managers. I'm just giving a really quick overview. But I think one of the strengths is that it will automatically pull the metadata for you, so you don't have to go through and fill out every single field yourself.
Can you search within Zotero? Like with EndNote, you can search button.
Yes.
I think you're talking about two different things there. So you can search the things you stored in Zotero. It does not work like Mendeley or EndNote where you can search various databases from within.
Oh, right, yeah. Yeah.
I'm wondering about all of these databases that you mentioned today. Is it possible to sort them so they'll be in chronological order or by title of journal or something like that?
Within the
database. In other words, for example, in the activity, it would be really helpful if it were like in reverse chronological order.
So I think there's a couple of questions there, right? So within Activity Insight itself, do you know how it sorts automatically on this publications page?
Yes, it's reverse chronological order.
Oh, okay, all right.
When you've already loaded them in.
Right,
Yes.
yeah, because one wants to know exactly what could be missing.
Uh-huh.
And that would be the best way to do it.
Yeah.
Okay,
All right, yeah, thumbs up for that.
Okay.
And then that's one thing that is not awesome about Google Scholar, is that it doesn't really allow you to, you can sort by title, you can sort by publication year, and you can sort by number of citations. That's the only option, really. So I could just, well, I want to switch computers.
Sorry, that brings up another question. For the activities, are we gonna have to upload citations or our publications, and how do we keep them separate?
So just the citation information will be stored. There is an option to upload a file to any of these publication entries. So if, say, you were compiling a dossier and you needed to put citations in sometime down the road, you would be able to pull those PDF files as attachments.
That's not quite what I mean. What I mean is, are we putting the equivalent of our CV in there with the publications that are our own only? Or are we expected to put in citations of our work?
Oh,
which is a
no,
different
okay, yeah, I
category?
misunderstood you, no.
I'm
it's
not
only,
at all talking about the.
Okay, it's only the items that you yourself have created, your personal activity. So you do not have to find things that have cited your work and include those. Those cited by things that showed up in Google Scholar and also in Researcher ID, those are just defaults in those platforms, but they aren't involved in Activity Insight at all.
Okay. Sorry to take your time, but it's.
No, I mean, Zayden is pretty much so, and so we could take questions and clarify anything at this point, for sure.
I try to export from the Google Scholar for my work, and then using the file format, and then they just shows the this page. How I can download this?
Okay, so from, let me just go to my profile real quick. If you just pull up Google Scholar.
Oh,
Okay, so this is my Google Scholar profile, right? So if you were to select everything on your profile, click Export, choose BibTech, it gets to this, right?
Yeah, and then what do we do?
So from here, you can do a right click on the PC and do Save As.
I don't get that.
If you right click, just anywhere on the screen,
Oh, okay, got it.
and then you can choose Save As. And I'm going to just do 2 so I know this one. I'm just putting it in my downloads folder right now, but you want to make sure you know where it is. And you click Save. Okay. Do you have to tell it that it's a BibTech? We'll see if it works. So then you could go to your Activity Insight profile, choose your file. It's getting real slow here. Go find where I saved that and choose Open.
It worked.
It works, yay! Well, that's great. Okay, so it's yelling at me because at this point almost all of mine are duplicates. So I'm not going to import those because I've pulled them in through other platforms. But this is where you could go through and check for duplicates. So the bug that I mentioned earlier, just so if you go back, and let's say I only want to export, I'm going to sort by year, right? And I only want to export this thing, which is ironically the benefits of library involvement in the implementation of a faculty activity reporting system, a poster that Sharon and I gave at the annual library conference this year. So if I only choose one thing to export, and I say I want a BibTech, it only gives me this right here. But the problem is if I do right click and Save As, I'll call this 3. I would recommend being more specific. It has exported everything again. And so this is a bug with Google Scholar. it doesn't make any sense because it's not what you see on the screen. So that's why it isn't as awesome as it initially seems. So there is a way to get around this to do updates, and that is to copy this and save it or paste it into a text file. And then save as a BibTeX. So it's a little bit more of a workaround, but if you are like a diehard Google Scholar user and you're very confident in your profile in Google Scholar, then this would be worth doing the workaround for. So we'll try like, just calling it that, I'll put it in your downloads. And then you end up with a correct exported BibTeX file that you could import. Just double check. Okay. And so what I would do at that point is I would actually go to my Zotero My Publications, and I would import the BibTeX that I exported from Google Scholar. And so that gives me a full rendering of everything, and then I could just update my Zotero My Publications going forward because it is so easy to sort, and it still does give you that nice public interface. If you're publishing like 25 things a year, that might get problematic. But again, this is activity reporting, so it's designed to be done on an annual basis once you get this first big entry done. Okay? Okay. Yes?
I have one question. For how long is the contract with Activity Insight?
Sharon already left, so she's much more familiar with those specifics. So
I'm just wondering.
like how soon we'll have to switch to something else.
Exactly.
Yeah. I understand the trepidation there, having also entered all of my stuff in Literati and now having to do it again, as us librarians are faculty members. So I participated tangentially in the Literati implementation, and compared to the approach that's been taken with Activity Insight, I think we have a much better chance of this really sticking and being what we go with for a long period of time. So there were a number of red flags about Literati from the very beginning, and I don't think that that has been the case. I can also point out that there are a multitude of other similar institutions that use Activity Insight. So Penn State, Purdue, other folks that are big R1 institutions that also have extension services affiliated, and they do okay for them, right? I wish some more of this were a little bit more magic, right? So you could take that nice document of bibliography that you have and just magically import it in here. But none of the platforms that we've explored have been that magic bullet. You know, we initially thought that Google Scholar was going to be the magic bullet, but then that bug popped up. So I think this is the 5th iteration of this particular workshop, and we've moved through different platforms trying to figure out what will work best. But the hope is that one of these approaches will do what you all need to minimize the pain of entering these things. So that's why we put together this guide that includes all these different options that you can leverage to get your publications into Activity Insight. Yes, over there first.
This is a non-publication question, but what is the deadline for all faculty to submit their Activity Insight report? Do you know?
So my understanding is that for tenure and tenure track faculty, okay, there it is. So you'll be reporting on your activities in calendar year 2019. And so based on previous years, I'm assuming that it will need to be entered in January and February. Okay.
The process will start on January 21st, and the deadline is it's going to be 13th March.
Okay.
So that will officially will start receiving news about it that the process has started.
And that's only for 2019.
Calendar year of 2019 is only for tenure and tenure.
And then backlogs we could do later.
So we hope to get all the data from 2010 to present time in the system, but for next year, we are only considering calendar year of 2019.
Once you have everything in here, it's easy just to generate the 2019 report.
Yeah, so the other thing to mention is that there's a number of integrations that have already been set up with Activity Insight. Quality research has been integrated for grants data, the course eval system.
That's all available in faculty guide, that's available on the.
Perfect. Okay, I'll stop trying to remember things off the top of my head. And so it's all included in the faculty user guide, and so it will detail what you can expect to be entered automatically and what requires more manual and or going through this publication import process.
Sometimes just to post the presentation or whatever, the conference presentation abstract not showing up the internet, especially in the international conference or something like that, they sometimes not showing up to the internet as a publication. Presentations are a special case, so I will point this out. That's a good question, thank you. So there's a couple of issues here. So for example, I have presentations that are on my Google Scholar profile, okay? Sometimes the abstract also published on the journals.
Yeah, so it's, the problem is that the import options in Activity Insight only work for publications because publications and presentations are on two separate screens here. So if you go in and you import stuff and you have presentations that come in as a publication, it doesn't transfer automatically. So you want to make sure that you're entering presentations separately. I will say that, and Ankit can maybe give me an update on the progress there, but we knew that it was going to be really hard for folks to gather presentation data again, since you just had to do this. So that has been a focus for cleaning up the literati data, and so I think it's something like 50,000 presentation records have been cleaned up and imported into Activity Insight. So you should hopefully see something here.
Mine are actually there.
Okay, perfect. All right, so yours are there in presentations. And presentations, unlike a lot of publications, don't have very many nice online indexing options, right? So those you may end up doing more manual entry for. Yeah, right there.
Can you foresee, since I'm from the College of Ag and Natural Resources, that extension professionals will need to focus most on the presentation section?
So Extension has actually been using Activity Insight for like 5 or 6 years separately. So Extension is already pretty familiar with it.
Great.
And we integrated them into our campus-wide implementation when we decided to go with that as a whole campus. But Extension has been using it for a lot longer than the rest of us.
That's great.
So they should be familiar with what they have to deal with in there, hopefully. Did you have a question?
No.
Okay.
Just to add on to you, we are almost done with the presentation uploads, just the last step is getting uploaded by the vendor, you clean that data, so it should be unlocked pretty soon.
Okay, so pretty soon the rest of the publication data should get in there if you notice anything missing. Or obviously that's only up until you completed your literati stuff, but at least it's better than nothing. Yeah.
So from your experience, which platform is better to export? There are so many different ways.
Yeah, no,
What you would recommend?
so this is where it can be really discipline specific. So my recommendation is to use whatever platform you found the most of your publications in. So for me, PubMed is useless, right? I would never recommend PubMed because none of my publications are in there. But for another person, PubMed may have 100% of their work and it covers their needs. So we demoed one way that you can export a BibTeX from Zotero, from Google Scholar, but some of our regular library databases also have the ability to export as BibTeX. So one example might be, do we have any language or literature folks here? So I use the MLA International Bibliography. I'm also a librarian for French and Spanish and some other languages. So if you find your works in one of our other library databases, you may be able to export that as a BibTeX file and then import it into Activity Insight. So we get this question a lot about citation managers as well, and Zayden and I have an ongoing thing as to whether Zotero is better or Mendeley is better. But I will never say this is the best one, because it depends so much on your workflow, where your publications will be found, and how you like to use interfaces, right? If you want to search right in Mendeley or EndNote for stuff, then don't use Zotero, because that doesn't work for that. So especially while I'm on camera, I'm definitely not going to be like, use this, it's the best way. But also, from my perspective, using the Zotero My Publications to keep track of your stuff going forward, or Mendeley My Publications, is really going to pay off the most in the long term, because then you have this nice place that's very carefully curated, and you can just keep your updates there as needed.
So EndNote doesn't have a My Publication function.
Does EndNote have My Publication? So this is where, so EndNote has an online interface, EndNote Online, right? And that is what we have access to as a university. But EndNote also has a very robust desktop platform that the university does not provide access to. So if you've purchased that desktop platform, it may do a good job of this. But we also don't support it officially, right? So I can't say for sure. Yeah.
So I think this is time for me to get connected with something like Zotero, and this is probably going to sound like a silly question. So you get PDFs of your pieces and then drag them into your Zotero account. Is there a difference between a PDF of like a journal article or like a copy of a chapter out of a book? Like, will it be able to parse out the information the same way from that copy, or?
It depends. So I don't, my workflow doesn't involve a lot of downloading PDFs and then dragging and dropping. I think there's a number of folks who do have that workflow. But so for me, I almost exclusively use the Zotero plugin in my browser, because that's where I'm finding articles, where I'm finding sources. So language and literature, for example, just a regular old book, right? So we'll go with a classic. Hopefully we have a bunch of copies of this. So I mean, at this point in my life, I will do everything possible to avoid typing in any citation information, which means I search for this either in our catalog, I search for it in a database, I find it somewhere, and then I will use it to pull it into my Zotero account. So I have this Chrome plugin set up. It's not loaded yet. We'll give it 1 second here. Thank you very much for
Thank you very
coming.
much.
Thanks for your questions. Okay. Okay. So let's say I do not want the Dan Brown copy. Do not want that. So you figure out, I'll take them. This is an excellent option. So you come across this book, you come across this article, whatever it might be, and then you can slurp that into Zotero the way that Zayden showed. So that's my typical workflow, and that's how I got all of my publications into my publication folder.
So, okay, so you don't have, in your Zotero, you don't actually have the full piece, the PDFs of the full pieces in there?
So I do. for the things that I have taken the time to include it.
Okay.
So these, it was really easy to just grab them automatically. I'm not sure why I haven't done that for these two, because I mean, it's an online journal article. It shouldn't be too hard to do that. But this is actually a conference presentation that I've included in here. This is a blog post on a peer-reviewed blog. So those were, I was able to get all the metadata, but I haven't included a scanned copy of it.
So if you have like your own copy, not the actual published copy that you find in the
Right.
database, that it would depend on like what the metadata, like whoever made it, what the metadata they put on it was. So if there is metadata in it on that PDF, the working copy or whatever, Zotero would try to parse that out. But if it's just like any old copy that you just like printed from Word, they probably won't. So you have to put that in manually in Zotero. And all the fields are like editable on the side, so you could do that.
Or you can grab as much as possible and then edit it, which is what I try to do. Okay, so thank you everybody, and again, my I've officially am done talking for the afternoon. I would like to apologize for the fact that we did not have lunch when it was promised. We will triple check that before the next time we put that on our advertising. I did just want to point out our website in the libraries. So Zayden and I are both from the Research Commons, and that's where you can hear about more workshops that are happening. And you can also schedule one-on-one consultations for things like statistical consulting, but also citation managers. So if you do decide to adopt Zotero, you want to get a little bit more one-on-one support, we do provide that as well. If you click on citation tools, and you can see all of the different workshops that we offer here. Okay. All right, well, thanks so much for your attention. Questions?
Just to say thank you, this was really helpful.
Oh, I'm glad. Well, I'm happy that it was helpful, and I am happy to talk about this stuff more going forward. So I anticipate we will continue to offer these. As I mentioned, we were recording, so that is going to get captioned and will end up on YouTube, and we'll share that in case you want to share with your colleagues.